Good afternoon. Welcome to 2022 Future Dialogue for Global Innovation. My name is Lee Hae-sung, hosting the special session today, Talks with James Cameron. The theme of today's forum is A Habitable New World, Rethinking Technology and Humanity in the Metaverse. The movie Avatar is what comes to mind when most people speculate about the concept of the metaverse. Avatar has allowed audiences to understand the otherwise abstract concept through visualization of the imagination. Avatar presented a world where avatars are active in lieu of human beings, which inspired engineers to create a new world. In light of the object of today's event, to discuss global talking points from a cultural perspective, a conversation on films, which are one of the best examples of the convergence of art and culture, will be a great opportunity. And we are pleased to announce that we have been able to invite director James Cameron himself. Also, director Kim Yong-Hwa joins us, not only as a director of major sci-fi films, but also as a pioneer of Korean technologies related to metaverse, such as VFX, to talk with James Cameron. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome director James Cameron. And director Kim Yong-Hwa, please welcome. Good afternoon, Mr. Cameron and Mr. Kim. I'm very pleased to meet you. I grew up watching your movies and a big fan of you, like most of the audience. So, thank you. I will give same questions to you, both directors, and then Mr. Kim will lead the rest of the session. Yeah, thank you. So please let me ask you the first question. As interest of metaverse has increased around the world, your avatar is frequently referenced as the seminal example of metaverse. So how does the emergence of new technologies or platforms such as metaverse affect creators? And does it present an opportunity or a challenge?
I never see challenges. I always see opportunities. Right? So
positive.
well, yeah. I think it's fair to say that the first film had an avatar motif because we had characters that were living vicariously or remotely through avatar characters that were, obviously existed in a different existence than they could. So that's an apt metaphor. The new film, not so much, because Jake Sully has evolved essentially permanently onto the Navi platform, if you will, right? But where I think it's relevant for me as a filmmaker is that a lot of the tools that we create to create very real facial performance and to capture performance and so on could be used, and a lot of the evolution of the technology that we're creating could ultimately be used for very highly detailed and highly realistic avatars and synthetic characters, for gaming and for actual, remote projection of our personalities in a metaverse environment. We're just not there yet in terms of being able to do it in real time, which is critical. And right now, as we know, our metaverse avatars are very crude compared to a finished character in a movie. So the question is, how can we close that gap and get to near time and then ultimately real time? And that's going to require concerted effort and large investments in order to do that. But I can already see the pathway for how to do it.
What do you think, Mr. Kim?
Well, they say Avatar was the one that initiated and extended the metaverse or universe. I also agree with that, but partially because in my thoughts, the 1984 film Terminator by director James Cameron was the one that actually opened the gate to the new universe. I was in the 6th grade of elementary school at the time. In Terminator, time and space are compressed and dragged on, and the story of time slack is also included there. So I think the Terminator was a kick-off moment. Since then, his sci-fi world has linked all the way to the metaverse. Frankly speaking, the movie Terminator became actually a driving force for me to make my dream come true, a film director Kim Yong-Hwa. After watching the film, I started to think of my dream. So in that sense, it is a personal honor to have this conversation with the director Cameron today. It is true that Avatar has had a tremendous impact on Metaverse. But in fact, we are only watching the beginning of the Metaverse impact in our industry, society, economy, and culture. There will be more applications in the field of military and medical care. Anyways, I think that the impact of Avatar has had on society, cinematically or otherwise, is huge.
Yeah, it seems that Mr.
Thank you.
Cameron have influenced a lot on Mr. Kim. Yeah, thank you.
Thank
I
you
would-
for that.
I would like to ask you the second question. The sequel of Avatar, which has been long awaited around the world, will be firstly open in Korea. And from the perspective of a culture and artistic practitioner, how do you assess Korea's position as one of the cultural leaders? And what role should such a country play?
Well, when I think of Korea and cinema, I think of two things. There are a lot of very talented filmmakers here. And it's a country and a culture that celebrates the cinema. And a culture that celebrates cinema does two things. One, they appreciate the big screen, and they foster the talent of up-and-coming filmmakers. And I think we're starting to see, a global acceptance of Korean filmmakers, which is fantastic, even at the Academy Awards recently and so on. I know that when one of my films plays in this market here in Korea, it's going to be on the very best screens that are available. Laser, IMAX, 4D. 4D originated here, and now it's spread around the world. So I love the fact that, Korean audiences love movies, still love to go to the movies, which is very important these days,
Absolutely.
right? And I know that it's possible here to see my new film in the best possible format, the way we intended it to be seen. And that's encouraging.
I'm sure that you will be the one who will bring back the audience to the theater in Korea.
Don't put that on me. I didn't invent the mRNA vaccines and all the other things that are allowing us to return. But yeah, let's remember that if we don't keep the cinemas alive, they'll go out of business. We have to want it. We have to kind of demand it in a way.
Well, like others, in my generation, I grew up listening to American movies or American pop songs. So at the time, one of the key tasks given to my generation was how well we can imitate the American culture. I also majored in English, but now that this era has arrived, I have been truly impressed that an era has come where Korean content can go beyond Asia and be consumed and loved across the world. And I think Koreans, in that sense, are very good at learning. So it seems that we are very generous in accepting other cultures, but without losing our own identities. That's my thought. And as I mentioned earlier, I belong to a generation that grew watching films by directors like James Cameron, Steven Spielberg, and Robert Zemeckis. I watched their films and learned from them. Our next generation, I'm sure, will take advantage of this well-polished infrastructure now. Korean director Bong Joon-ho also said, "What is global? At the end of the day, the most local can be the most global. I hope that the next generations can keep the value of being local so that we can be more culturally powerful as well as generous. That is my hope for our future.
From now on, Mr. Kim would lead the rest of the session.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Kim will throw a topic for you.
Today, on this stage, I'm more nervous than the day my movie premiered.
Me too.
As a generation that grew up watching Mr. Cameron's movies like this, I always find that in your movies, you make the audience feel the growth of the main characters in the movie. For instance, in the movie Abyss, I saw a lot of directing skills that exceed the written scenario, maybe from the perspective of a film director. Regarding the way of thinking about human beings, for example, even in Abyss, the wife is not dead, but they try to save her. In reality, when a person comes at such a moment, they would slap her in the face or become angry like the scenes in other films. While watching the scene, I wondered how far the director should consider human beings and the scope and approach of the directing. I needed it as a director to express my view. In that sense, I realized that you are very good at directing unexpected plots or characters. For instance, a bad man becomes a good man in the end, or other kinds of character variations. A character variation that can really make a bad man a little bit less bad. I wonder as a director how much variation you prefer to give to an ordinary character. That's my question. Is it too difficult question to answer?
That's a really interesting question, and you're going all the way back to the Abyss. I think for me, it's always been about playing against expectation. You know, it's interesting, especially in a sequel. You have to do something that the audience expects. You know, they're paying good money to come and see something that they recognize based on the previous film. But then try to play against it, you know, and make the characters as interesting as possible. Like you point out in the new film that KOREAZ isn't the way we expect him to be. He's basically like a shark in the first movie. Very simple, right? But in the new movie, he's more complicated. You know, he's got a kind of existential problem. Is he the guy he was before, or is he a new guy? Is this boy really his son? Is he really the father? He's got a lot on his mind. So, you know, I set out to make the bad guy, the adversary, as interesting as you know, as the other characters. And you know, because you're very, very good with the visual effects, and you even have your own visual effects company, you know that the visual effects have to be good these days. They have to be beautiful and perfect. But that's not what makes a good movie. What makes a good movie is the characters, right? And I see that in your work as well. You balance it. It's all about a balance, right? Between the visual and the dramatic and the heart, right? Yeah.
I think you have just answered my next question. In fact, I also run my own studio, Dexter. And I think I founded Dexter since I was largely influenced by the global trend and the global directors. There are leading companies around the world such as Digital Domain, co-founded by you, ILM, and Weta Digital. You took the challenge of creating a great VFX company. So rather than just trying to follow your steps, I also want to be good at VFX to create a better image of the world I dream of, to better appeal to the audience, to touch them effectively with CG. That was my dream. So that is why I created my own studio.
아무튼 I see you.
Anyways, I see you, as always.
Well, I see you as well. And you know, you're talking about digital domain. That was a very interesting time in history where we were pivoting from analog effects, optical printers. Nobody even remembers what an optical printer is these days. But it was a radical concept at that moment that we would create a visual effects company entirely based on digital technique and digital composite. So, you know, I think that if you're a filmmaker such as yourself, Mr. Kim, that makes films that are fantasy, that are science fiction, you've told me that you like science fiction and you're making a science fiction film now, you're going to be working in VFX, you know, your whole career, you know, because if you're like me, you love it and you want to do it. So actually running your own company in the future will make you the best possible client for visual effects companies, whether it's your own or whether it's other people, because you'll understand what it takes to run a company, to have some kind of a profit margin, how difficult it is organizationally, how difficult it is, and how hard it is to keep the quality up, you know, on a budget and all those things. And so I think that my experience as the CEO of Digital Domain, even though it was only for 4 or 5 years, has made me a better filmmaker and a better client of companies like ILM and Weta Effects, because I speak their language, and it's in my best interest to protect their profit margin, because I want them to make money. I want them to be the best they can be, you know. And the more margin they are able to realize, the more money they can spend on R&D to improve their tools to be ahead of the curve for the future. So I need to be a responsible client as a film director, and your experience now of running a VFX company is going to do that for you. I'm sure it has already.
저는 아직 10년
Well, I have been running a company that has been in the radar for 10 years.
그
Yeah, you don't make any profit. That's the thing. But you got to not go out of business.
그
Let me tell you a bit more about the VFX. I have watched the director's films for a long time, and I get a lot of inspiration from visually great things. In fact, in the case of Avatar, when it was first released, I was preparing a movie called Mr. Go, which failed commercially. But for the film, I intensively studied the VFX shot flows and plans of your film, sometimes watching a single sequence over 100 times. And the part that I kept admiring was, on top of VFX and artistic elements, that you are truly amazing, especially in mechanical design. I'm sure many would agree on that. I think you know very well how to design a mechanical structure, how it should be designed cinematically to create a sense of fear, thrill, and power. So I'm a bit curious about whether or not you have been very interested in such a mechanical design ever since you were little.
Well, 3D is interesting. You know, I mean, we're all in 3D all the time. We all have 2 eyes, most of us do, anyway. And most of the creatures on planet Earth have a minimum of 2 eyes. Insects have more, spiders have more, but nobody's got 1 eye. You know, there's no cyclops out there. So it's something that nature has hardwired into our brains, even hundreds of millions of years ago, our distant ancestors. And we process in 3D. So, you know, I approach the problem as, I want to make my movie feel as real in the moment as possible. So I'm making a movie for human beings, and human beings see in 3D. But there are a lot of technological hurdles, as you know now. You've made films in 3D. I've made films in 3D. It's not so easy. The important corner that we rounded was I guess probably about the time of Avatar, the first film, or maybe a year before, was getting the digital cinema people who were creating the baseline technology, you know, the chipset for the projectors and the server architecture, getting them to baseline the idea of being able to carry a stereo signal and being able to decode it in the theaters. Because once we got that built in, every theater everywhere that's a digital theater is a 3D theater. So people talk about 3D going down. It's like, okay, that's fine, except that when Avatar came out, there were about 3,000 3D theaters in the world. And now, 13 years later, there are about 120,000 3D theaters in the world. So if a film comes along, if you, Mr. Kim, if you want to make a movie in 3D, or I want to make a movie in 3D, the platform's out there. It's ubiquitous. So that was the true victory of the whole thing, was convincing, you know, the chipset people and the people that were kind of coming up with the baseline architecture for what we think of as digital, what we call digital cinema today, to get it in early. Otherwise, we'd be fighting an uphill fight even now. So now 3D is a consumer choice. You can see a movie in 2D, you can see it in 3D. If you don't like 3D, don't go to 3D. You know, it's pretty simple. I'm still very proud of Avatar: The Way of Water in 2D. Works very well, still beautiful. You're seeing it in 2D here, you know. So the images, you know, the design, the photography, the lighting, the acting, the performance, all those things, all the same. 3D adds an extra layer of immersion, and I think that increases the emotional impact of the movie a little bit, you know, kind of like a turbocharger on an engine, but it's not necessary. I like it personally, and I like it when it's presented properly. And that's the nice thing about the Korean marketplace, is that there's a lot of high-quality projection. You know, the audience demands it here, and there's a lot of it installed here.
Well, as you know well, a perfect 3D film is possible because it is also a perfect 2D movie. I'm sure you can feel the three-dimensional effect even if you look at it in 2D, since many things are already designed in 3D in the original film, including the camera movement. Of course, if you watch it in 3D, the 3D effect will be doubled. Finally, let me ask you one more question. Watching your films, I thought that you think a lot about life and death. Actually, I'm also very interested in that part, so that is why I made my latest film along with the gods. What I'm trying to say is, if I should define the core reason of my filmmaking with a single word, that would be comfort. If we can make a movie by which people can be comforted, it would be the best virtue, right? So my question is, if you can define the reason for filmmaking, what would it be? That's my question.
That's a real,
How do you define condolence, giving condolence?
well, that's really interesting. If you look at the end of Titanic and you look at the end of Avatar: The Way of Water, they're kind of similar because they deal with a concept of an afterlife, or at least how people deal with death. So my feeling, if you're telling a love story, you have to deal with some element of sacrifice. You don't have to, but I like to do that. If you value somebody more than yourself, what are you willing to do, and what does that sacrifice mean, and what does it mean? To me, love and death are kind of two sides of the same coin in narrative storytelling, going back to the Greeks, going back to Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet. You know, I think love is the thing that binds us together and makes us feel like we have a purpose in the world, and that purpose is critical because we have a finite amount of time here to do what we need to do. Maybe that's to raise a family. Maybe that's just to love someone and to be loved by someone. And to be loved by someone is to be seen by that person, to be understood, you know. So we all are looking for connection. And I think movies very often deal with either love or the loss of love or the lack of love and what that does to people, you know. And that's what I love about movies. It's an art form about us as humans and all the different emotions that we experience. I mean, I like action movies, and action is its own kind of art form. But I also like all aspects of human existence. And the emotions are the most important thing, and that's why no matter how great we become with the VFX, it's still always going to be about the actors. The actors are the ones that mediate the emotion for us up there on the screen and cause us to feel something. Maybe the music helps, maybe the lighting helps, and all the other art that we bring to it. But it's the actors that really pull on our hearts. And that's why, you know, we're both very technical filmmakers, but we also both really understand how important those performances are.
Mm-hmm. So in your movie, death can be overcome by the power of love, right?
I think so.
Mm-hmm. And I have a question about sustainability. You are doing various sustainability projects, and you're a vegan yourself, and it seems that themes related to this kind of topic can be seen in the new film as well as in the first Avatar. So could you please talk about your thoughts on sustainable future?
Well, I define sustainability not as some little token thing that we can do to make ourselves feel better, or some token greenwashing thing that we can do as corporations to present a better image to the world. For me, I think of it, when I think of sustainability, I call it deep sustainability. How is the human race really going to be 100 years from now or 200 years from now? What does the seventh generation look like? That's a Native American expression, the seventh generation. What decisions do we make now to protect them, our children's 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 children, and so on? So to me, sustainability is not being done very much up to what I consider to be the level of deep sustainability. To do that, we're going to have to really change our fundamental contract with the natural world and with each other, and we're going to have to redefine wealth in order to do it. So, okay, as a filmmaker, as an artist, you know, can I say something with my voice that makes a difference? I can't, in a movie like Avatar: The Way of Water, I can't tell people what to do when they walk out of the theater. That's not the purpose of it. It's entertainment, it's adventure, it's emotion, it's all those things. But it's not action. It's not, you know, orders of what to go and do that. People are going to have to figure that out in a different forum than a movie theater. And by the way, if you're too preachy, they're not going to show up in the first place. But what I think a movie like The Way of Water can do is maybe remind us how beautiful and how wondrous the natural world is. Maybe remind us that we need to connect with each other. Maybe show some beauty and some hope, you know. I don't think films are beautiful enough anymore. If you think about, you know, an environmental movie, it might be a post-apocalyptic kind of aftermath, burned out kind of world. I don't want to do that movie. I want to do a movie that's a celebration of nature, because it's nature that's getting destroyed right now, and we're not going to protect something if we don't love it. And we all love it at some level, but sometimes we need to be reminded to be in that state that we're in when we're kids. You know, you have a kid go into the forest or, you know, snorkel around a reef, you know, something like that. They love it. You can't get them to come home for dinner. And then we lose that as we go along, I think. So maybe a movie like Avatar can reconnect people with that.
I really admire your love for nature and passion for farming, as well as your filmmaking ability. So as we are running out of time, I think we have to wrap up here. And do you have any words to say?
내가
Mr.
하면서
Kim?
끝낼게요. 그럼 먼저
Okay,
인사를.
I may answer to the question before closing.
부탁하신 말씀 같이 할게요. 그러면
Okay, I will provide my answer. What is sustainable? All cultures, creatures, and everything, like avatars. Those are created, developed, and destroyed. It is perfectly natural. Now, I think the director Cameron also keeps saying that don't go against the laws of nature. I think, like a movie, everything will go through the process of creation, development, and extinction. So I hope to pursue the vast values and live well in this natural cycle. There is one thing, but that should be sustainable. I truly hope that director Cameron continues to make such great movies sustainably. On and on. I want to see your movie sustainably. That is my hope.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and Mr. Cameron, please say goodbye to the audience. Please say goodbye to the audience.
Well, I guess we're done. We're out of time. I think this has been productive. We didn't talk about the metaverse that much. Maybe next time. I got another film coming out in 2 years. I'll come back. We'll talk about the metaverse then.
Thank you for your precious time, two directors.